Welcome back, everyone, to the FreightWaves Enterprise Fleet Summit. Excited to talk about a huge topic in the industry today, and that is recruiting drivers and filling seats in your fleet. Excited today to be joined by Marilyn Serber. Marilyn and I actually met in 2014 at a CVTA conference. That's for hiring student drivers. My name is Rob Hatchett. I'm president of Seat My Trucks. Back in 2014, I was vice president of recruiting at Covenant Transport. And so got to meet Marilyn when she was working at Melton. And so for the time that we've known each other, all of our conversations have been around how do we hire drivers and fill the seats of our fleets. And so now that the industry, this is one of the hottest topics, I'm excited that we get to share a conversation together, but with all of you today. So Marilyn, I'm excited about our talk.
Me too, Rob. Thanks so much. And yeah, it's really great to be with you today. And we've been friends for a long time, since 2014, and I think the only things we've ever talked about are driver recruiting and fishing. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about both of those today. And as Rob said, I used to work at Melton Truck Lines. I spent 11 years there doing different things in the driver recruiting space and the field recruiting and military recruiting and safety training and driver training and corporate communication. So got to spend a lot of time there just learning a lot about our industry. And I've been with 10th Street now for a couple years, and so been really excited to be able to continue that work in helping carriers recruit drivers. And I'm always happy to talk about these issues that are facing our industry. The same ones, right, Rob, like you said, that we've been talking about since 2014. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about your fishing story.
All right, well, let me dive into that and here's where it came from, Marilyn. You and I obviously live in the driver world every day. And so, but now that it's being talked about more, we've got people in our industry that just don't live in the recruiting world every day saying, hey, help me understand exactly what's happening now. So I thought, I got to come up with an analogy or a story that just paints the picture of here's what we're facing right now when it comes to driver recruiting and to filling seats. And so I've got a fishing story. Now, I don't know much about fishing, okay? I'm not a good fisherman. I just think this story fits perfectly. So here it is. Picture that you are fishing in the same pond today that you were fishing in a year ago. Okay, you're fishing in the pond today that you were fishing in a year ago, but there's 18% less fish. And there's a lot more people fishing in your pond, and some of their bait looks better than your bait. So how are you going to catch the same number of fish last year that you did last year, this year, if there's 18% less fish and there's more people fishing and there's some good-looking bait out there? Now, obviously the analogy is think about the driver world. If there's 18% less drivers, again, there's different numbers out there, and we'll kind of dive in, and I'm thankful for 10th Street and the data that they provided. If there's 18% less drivers, and we know that the demand is so stinking strong for drivers right now that there's more carriers advertising and driver pay increases everywhere, the bait looks better, how are we as enterprise fleets going to continue hiring the same number of drivers? So we want to use that analogy and that story today to kind of guide our conversation. And so Marilyn, I want to ask you, and I know this is something that you're really in tune with at 10th Street, but let's talk first about the drop in drivers that I mentioned. Okay, is it 18% less? And where did those drivers go? So let's just kind of lay the framework before we kind of talk about some potential solutions. But talk to us about where did all these drivers go?
Yeah, no, I love that analogy because I think it does tell the story of driver recruiting and what we see happening this year. And it's something that paints that picture for everyone. And so, to keep with that analogy, you're right. The pond is not as stocked as it was last year. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, we all know we're living in a global pandemic, and that certainly impacted driver hiring in that environment and the number of drivers that are in the market. You mentioned 18% less. So what does that mean? It means that there's just less drivers applying for jobs in trucking for a lot of reasons. So at the onset of COVID, right, we had shutdowns and we had a lot of, fear, rightfully so, right? And so that caused companies to make changes oftentimes in their hiring decisions that they're still recovering from today. And also a lot of drivers just decided we're not going to be drivers anymore. If they were close to retirement age, they might have just decided to go ahead and take their retirement. They might have decided to get a local job at home because, their wife just finally said, hey, enough is enough with this pandemic. I need you to be at home. We also saw an increase in final mile jobs, right? And the demand for some of that work, whether, with Amazon and FedEx, that delivery drivers, but also with, just Instacart and Grubhub and DoorDash. So we saw a ton of demand for that go up. And, so now you have people with CDLs, doing those jobs because they're, making pretty decent money with the demand and they can be at home. And so the market just kind of changed overnight, right? And that caused us, it changed the whole market. We saw supply chain change and we saw the demands change. So at the same time, when we're fully in recruiting crisis, right, we have almost more demand and pressure on the supply chain with the way that e-commerce has changed everything in 2020. So it's very interesting. It's also interesting to think about, here we are now, 2021. So we're a year later and we're still talking about, well, where did all these drivers go? And some of them haven't come back. We definitely know in recruiting that it's cyclical and that drivers kind of come and go based on, when construction is up, usually, we see drivers go and do those jobs and then we see them come back. And we're not seeing that at the same rate that we typically see in other downturns. Other things that contributed to the driver market shrinking in 2020 was the number of drivers trained. So we know on an average year, around 350,000 new drivers enter the market. So we mentioned that overall driver activity is down about 18%, but the student activity and what we see with CVTA and the National Association of Publicly Funded Truck Driving Schools and then our own data is that student activity and new driver activity is actually down around 30%. So less drivers, 30% less new drivers came into the market. Well, that has a lot of effects, right, on trucking. And again, not just in the immediate term, but there's a lot of trickle down and long-term effects of less new drivers entering the market. And there's still less new drivers entering the market. So even now today, driving schools cannot train the same number of drivers that they were able to train pre-COVID. There's a lot of restrictions that they have, whether those are from their company or from their state or their locality or just driver safety, right? We have to still protect new drivers coming into the market. And so they might only be able to train around half of the new drivers that they were able to train before COVID because of those restrictions. And so those are real numbers, and that's a real impact on the availability of drivers in the market. And we rely on that to move forward. So not just drivers that are hiring students right out of school, but drivers that are hiring, companies that hire drivers with a year experience. Well, now there's 30% less drivers in April, right, that are going to have a year experience because they didn't get their CDL last year. So we just see a lot of trickle down effects, and we're going to be dealing with this and having to adjust to it, for a long time, right? And so as carriers, we have to think about, what are we going to do to attract new drivers? And, Rob, what are we doing right now to attract more drivers? What do you see from carriers?
Yeah, and before I shift to that, Mary, let me throw in a couple more thoughts. So obviously, we had the clearinghouse that's taken a good number of drivers potentially completely out of the market, and so I've heard 50 and 60,000. Again, that number is only increasing each day. And then one thing that I think about it's tough to put data around this, but so many carriers are focusing more on retention right now, right? Hey, if we're having a harder time recruiting, then we got to keep our drivers. And so I've heard some carriers talk about the drop in turnover because they're trying so hard to keep their drivers. Well, if turnover goes down, then that's less people in the applicant pool. Now, that's still drivers in the industry, obviously, but for those trying to hire, if turnover goes down everywhere, then there's less people to go after. And so, again, just thinking about, less and less people that if I need to go hire somebody tomorrow, where's that pond I'm fishing?
No, you're right. The clearinghouse is a great point. That's removed people, and then on the retention front, and retention did improve last year. Which is great, and for our industry when drivers can stay where they are. But it makes it hard to recruit them. I'm really interested to see what happens with turnover this year. I mean, right, from being in recruiting for so long, driver recruiting and retention are always the top issues, and so it'll be interested to see how they balance each other out as this year, which is, again, going to be a year like none other we've ever seen, right? It'll be interesting to see how they play out in the market.
Yeah. So if we've got less people to go after, then we've got to improve our recruiting skills or our fishing skills, if we want to stay with that analogy. And so it's interesting as I work with carriers, everybody's looking for what can we do better as a carrier to attract more drivers. And there's lots of options. And so you see some people that are, again, staying with the analogy, putting more poles in the water. They're hiring more recruiters. They're saying, okay, it's getting more difficult, so let's go hire more recruiters. And if you jumped on LinkedIn, I mean, the first 10 posts that I see typically are, hey, I'm hiring recruiters. And so, hey, let's get more people to fight this battle and to find more drivers. And so obviously along with that, then you've got to generate more leads. And so if you go talk to a lot of carriers, they've had to increase their advertising budgets to get more leads because they've got more recruiters. And so that's one of those that's almost getting more people going after those fish. Other things that you not talked about as much, but hiring area. And so that's one thing that, let's say your carrier has a 6-state hiring area. Well, can you add another state or two? And then obviously that may not be as easy on operations. That may not work as well for your freight network. But if all of a sudden you can hire from a whole nother state, that's more opportunities that you have. You think about hiring guidelines. Some people have required 24 months experience. If you move that to 12 months experience, that allows you more people to go after. And so obviously all that is on a carrier by carrier basis. What can we do to have more ammo to go after more drivers? But then we get to what we typically see the most, and that is driver pay increases and sign-on bonuses. And that's the one that the market has just continually moved really since June. Now, just think about that. A year ago today, as we were entering COVID, there were plenty of drivers a year ago today. I mean, there were carriers who stopped advertising, who stopped the orientation because, again, manufacturing was closing down. We don't know if we actually need drivers. So a year ago, we were not having this conversation. And so really, when the world started coming back in June of last year, manufacturing started coming back. That's where it started getting difficult, okay? And so since then, it's like, okay, how do we attract more? But there are a lot of people, and I remember this very well, in 2018, remember that? That's when it was tough to hire drivers too. And a lot of carriers did pay increases 2 and 3 times in 2018. But what happened in 2019? We had a little correction. And I think everybody remembers that because it was only a couple years ago. And so we're doing these pay increases, but we're still going, but what if we go backwards, kind of like we did in 2019? And so so it's one of those, just to see carriers' different approaches to the pay side in terms of, do we raise cents per mile? There's all different types of pay options out there. Again, sign-on bonuses, but for the most part, everybody's knowing if I'm going to be more attractive to the fewer number of drivers there are, pay is one of those things that attracts people. And so we're looking for the top pay or the top quality job. When there's less people, we've got to look attractive. And so that's where I mentioned earlier about the bait looking better. You've got a lot of bait out there, but also something to think about. There are a lot of carriers that have traditionally had lower turnover. You think about a lot of home daily dedicated jobs, a lot of private fleets, to where now they're even entering the water, to where they're focused on advertising and hiring more. And so we've got some people hiring in places that we never saw. So there's that additional competition from some of those fleets. And but we got to make our processes as good as possible. So you see a lot of carriers doing that. And then our product, our bait. And so you see tons of the pay increases, sign-on bonuses. And again, the question is, but where are we going? I mean, it's one of those, the market is still moving, and that's the tough thing for carriers is if I do this right now, is that going to be enough? But that's the unknown, and we're all obviously trying to use wisdom to know what's it going to take for my carrier to fill our seats. And you see lots of different strategies that carriers are taking. So all that said, Marilyn, so we've got less fish. We know we're trying to look better in the marketplace. We're trying to have better processes. But at the end of the day, I think you and I and the whole industry knows we got to get more fish in the water. We got to get more people in our industry. We got to get more Class A drivers that want to drive tractor trailers, and that is the key to long-term growth, getting more opportunities. And so I know you are totally plugged in with the CDL schools, and so what are you hearing right now about new entrants into the market, as that's got to be the long-term solution for this driver recruiting, for filling seats, as we need more people. So what are the schools saying as we sit here today?
No, you're exactly right. We have to have more fish in our pond, and you're very active in our industry, and so kind of at that level, that's an industry issue, and ATA and TCA are kind of working always on that issue. Now, trucking has benefited from good publicity because of COVID, right? And so I think that's great. That image and that projecting that positivity about our industry, I think, is all 100% positive for truck driving schools and attracting new people into our industry. So hopefully we're able to keep up that momentum, right? And the Drive Safe Act, which is going to allow hopefully interstate CDL travel driving for 18 to 20-year-olds, that hopefully that is going to be a reality sometime in the near future versus the longer future, right? So we have all of those things happening kind of at a higher level, that it's working on a long-term plan to solve the driver shortage that has been a huge topic in our industry for forever. But in the near term, right, in recruiting crisis 2021, you're like, the Drive Safe Act isn't helping me. So what are these schools doing? What is happening? How are we getting more drivers right now? Well, in truck driving schools, we talked a little bit about the limitations that they have, but the schools that I talk to are busy. They have waiting lists, so they're training drivers really just as fast as they can. Some of the bigger schools that have multiple locations are opening. You've seen opening up new locations, to meet the demand of people, wanting to be truck drivers. And so that's all net positive. It can't happen fast enough, right? It takes time. When somebody starts truck driving school, their program is at least 3 weeks, right? Maybe longer depending on the program they go to. And then they have to go to orientation at their carrier, which is 3 days to 3 weeks. And then they have to go out with a trainer, which is 2 weeks to 6 weeks, maybe, depending on the company. And so that's a long time before that driver who's starting truck driving school on April 1st is working for a carrier, and even longer before they're actually making money for a carrier. And so we have the people who are wanting to enter our industry. It's just going to take time for them to get to us. And that's without delays, right? So there is still testing delays in a lot of states, which is another barrier for new entrants. So if a driver graduates from truck driving school, then they have to sit for their exam, right, to be licensed to go to work for a carrier. So we're seeing delays, for weeks and, over 30 days in some places. And so we actually lose drivers. So, how can carriers help with that is to be involved and know their state issues, right? And be involved on a state level, because that's just losing drivers. So whether you're the carrier that hires the student right out of school, or you're the carrier relying on those other carriers to hire that guy or gal and keep them in their program for a year so that then you can hire them, it impacts all of us, whether we're hiring students or not. But the schools have students, and they want, they're training them as fast as they can. Driver trainers is also a big issue. Are there enough driver trainers, not only at truck driving schools, but at your carrier? So, building that up. And so, as far as schools go, they're poised to have a great year. Hopefully restrictions will loosen as we get further in the year, and they'll be able to resume normal training levels. But I haven't talked to any schools yet this year that are training at the level that they were pre-COVID. And so that kind of tells us, right, where we're at and what we need to be thinking about as far as that goes for this year.
Yeah, and so that's obviously one pool of drivers to get more into the industry. So through CDL school training, getting new entrants. There's another group that, as we think about how do we get more people driving Class 8 trucks, CDLA, there are a lot of people that have a CDLA with an active med card that just don't have recent experience. And this is something that I see a lot as we get applications in. A lot of carriers, every carrier has different hiring guidelines, but a lot of carriers say you've got to have a certain amount of experience in the past 12 months. Or you can only have so much unemployment in the past 12 months. Again, different guidelines from every carrier. But I'm seeing lots of applications where this person has a CDLA, they've got a good driving record, they just don't have recent experience. So it's not a student coming out of CDL school, but think about the person that's been on unemployment for the past 12 months. They've got a license, they want to drive, but they don't qualify because of the recent experience. Think about someone who's been driving final mile delivery. All right, that may not be a Class A license, but they've got it. They've been doing that for 2 years, but now they're ready to go back over the road. Well, they don't qualify because they don't have recent experience. And so who knows what that number actually is? Let's say it's 250,000 people that have a Class A license that have been doing something else, whether they're driving final mile or they're sitting at home with unemployment, or they've just been doing another job. Those people want to come drive, and so often they have to go through a refresher program. It could be called a lot of stuff, a requalifying process. And so that's where besides just students coming out of CDL school, I'm going, we've got a big number of people that have to be requalified. And so that's where every carrier may have a different process. Again, do they have to go out with a trainer? Does the carrier offer an on-site refresher program? Do they partner with a school to have a refresher program? As you said, the schools are full right now, so it's not like they can, take on additional refresher people. But that's where, as I'm thinking about getting more people into the driver pool, it's like we need to get some of these people back. They got their license 4 or 5 years ago. They just don't have recent experience, and they don't qualify based on hiring guidelines for a lot of carriers. Well, how are we going to get them back if they want to come back? And so that's one thing that I've been really, especially these past couple of months, seeing these people going, they're wanting to drive, that there's just not that many carriers that have a process, a program to help them become qualified. And I think that's a big number if we could figure that out.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Rob. There's a lot of people. I know that formula that we always used to use, right, is more time off the road than on the road. And so they need to be retrained. And so I think, you mentioned, partnering with your local tech, trade school or technical school. Sometimes they have resources to help, or they can help you get resources. But, carriers, especially, enterprise fleet carriers, is there some type of refresher course, that you might be able to do with your driver trainers or with your orientation supervisors, or, something that may not be a program that you would put in place permanently, but that you might be able to gear up, and something that you can do to just meet the immediate need. You're right. And you talked about also evaluating your process. So how are you tracking these guys? How are you coding them or labeling them so that you can find these folks that, do have older experience, or they have, more time off the road than they were on the road, so that you can then go get them. So you can do a targeted campaign for them if there is a program that you can put in place. And so, thinking about that is a great point, Rob, that I don't know what that number is either, but there has to be, thousands and thousands of those drivers out there if carriers can figure out a way to put something like that in place, pretty quickly.
And I'll tell you one thing that kind of as we close it, that I think we just got to be careful of, that I get asked a lot thinking about that new person coming in from CDL school, or that person coming back to driving, is that I get asked a lot, well, if we're going to driverless trucks, then am I still going to have a job? Now, I love the technology that's happening in the trucking space, and obviously in the recruiting world, we use technology all the time, but it's just interesting as we want more and more drivers right now. And then sometimes they ask, but are you going to driverless? And again, I know sometimes we want to turn that conversation. A lot of times we talk driver assisted trucks. We need you, but it's just interesting because some of them go, hey, I've heard this. Am I going to have a job in a year? And so that's just where, again, obviously as an industry, love the technology, but controlling the narrative to go, no, no, we do want you. We do have a job for you. So I do have that question a lot. So that's been interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting. I think, and you're right. I think, we controlling that narrative and using that term driver assisted technology, I think is really important. And, just kind of, spreading that message, to our CDL schools and, folks that might even, aren't even thinking about truck driving yet, but making sure that we are putting it out there. We're still going to need drivers. I'm kind of the school that thinks the technology is actually going to help us recruit different people into this industry that maybe we didn't have access to before. And so I think it's the messaging is so important to just make sure that we love drivers and we need them and we're going to continue to need them. So.
Well, great. Well, Marilyn, I have loved having this conversation with you and with others. And obviously, it'll be interesting to see where we are 6 months from now. But I know that, like I said, our focus is finding more people. That's the long-term solution that choose our great industry. And it's nothing that the two of us can solve. It's all of us working together. And I feel like that's happening in the industry. I feel like there's momentum to say we as a group, as an industry, need to team together to get more people choosing us. That's the long-term solution. And so hopefully as the months go on, we'll continue to see messaging out there that attracts more people to our industry and gets more fish in the pond. Hopefully that's been a good analogy today.
Yes, I have appreciated it. I love talking to you and others about all of this stuff, and I'll look forward to us, talking about it again in 6 months when we have 6 months more worth of data and things to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thanks guys.